And welcome to a VSA Capital video blog, and delighted today to have Tom Abraham James, the President and CEO of Pulsar Helium. Morning, Tom.
Good morning, Andrew. Nice to see you.
Yeah. Now, look, we've talked a little bit in the past and done various sort of bits of social media on Pulsar Helium and the helium market in general. And London is starting to get a bit of a grip on helium, but of course, what's really interesting about you is your helium in Minnesota, which is the United States of America, which is key because helium is a critical gas. Let's call it a gas for now. Everyone debates whether it's gas or mining. It sort of sits in the middle. And helium is becoming more and more important. Of course, you have very high grade helium as well. But why don't we just to start with, just give us a quick recap of where you are, what's going on in Minnesota, and why this is such an exciting project, and then we'll go on to some other details afterwards.
Sounds good. Well, it's the Topaz Project in northern Minnesota, and it's a brand new discovery. When I say brand new, a couple of years, but we're the first mover there. And so it's a discovery that's now been drilled twice and confirmed that the helium is there. And as you say, high concentration. So what we see is, you could think of helium a bit like the precious metals, perhaps, that you never get a pure occurrence, as much as it would be lovely to have a ton of gold. But the helium's the same. It's always mixed with something else, and so grade is king. And the sort of industry expectation is to go into production, you need about 0.3% helium in your gas stream or higher. And for us, we've got up to 14.5%, which is just a mind-boggling number that we're of course happy with. And so with that, gas naturally comes up to surface. So that means it doesn't need any stimulation. There's no fracking or anything like that. It's a bit like cracking the can on a soda can. It naturally comes out. Not associated with water, so it's a dry gas too, which simplifies things no end from a processing environmental standpoint. And really the positives with the high concentration helium are that the amount of overall gas in place that you need to find to come up with a relatively large number is less than if the grade was lower. And then also the expectation is there'll be a positive knock-on for operational costs as well, because you're processing less gas. So we've done we've drilled that, very pleasing results, and now it's the next phase, which is how much is there, the volume. So we just announced that we're going to be drilling up to an additional 10 wells, and that commences later this month. And then after that, with any luck, we'll be starting to talk about updated resource, what's the size of the prize, and then economic studies, and when can this potentially go into production.
What was the sort of timing of all this? Because I mean, those are the questions people want to know. I mean, we know you're very high grade, we know where you are, but people want to know just how much there is there, what the effectively life of mine is. What's the timing on getting all of this information?
Our internal objective is that by the middle of next year, we'll have all the information, we'll have the reports conducted, so we can effectively get to a final investment decision point at the middle of next year. And then after that, so we have an agreement in place with a company called Chart Industries. They design and fabricate industrial plants. And for them to do a combined helium and CO2 facility and commission it, it's going to take between 12 and 18 months. So therefore, perhaps late 2027 may be a possibility.
And actually, just picking up on a little point you put in there, of course, you are combined with CO2. And going back to your grade point, of course, the really low grades at 0.3 is often it's just a byproduct of natural gas, and that's what Qatar do, basically, to produce a lot of helium. You are effectively a helium. But, I mean, just give us a quick snippet on the CO2, because that's a nice little extra you have, isn't it?
It is. So there's definitely value there. And so it's a funny situation, I must admit. Like in the United States, there is a CO2 shortage. And when you're thinking about we're trying to capture everything possible and put it back in the ground, it is a bit unusual to think of it as this way. But there's CO2 and then there's CO2. So you've got the emission CO2, which is dirty. It's got all sorts of impurities in there. And then you've got the CO2, which is in the ground, like we have, which is effectively a pure form of CO2, which is what can be used by industry. And when I say industry, the big ones are food preservation, so increasing shelf life, beverages, of course, carbonation for drinks. And then the other one is reducing the pH for potable water. CO2 is used quite extensively there. So where we are in Minnesota, it's quite displaced from the USA's CO2 production. And then the other thing there is an overall shortage. So we see the demand for CO2 as being actually very significant. And it won't have the same economic impact as the helium, but it'll be a very nice value add, I would say.
Always nice to have a little bit of extra on the side, Tom.
Mm.
Now, this week you've put out a pretty intriguing RNS. I mean, you've increased your land acreage, I think it's by about 1,000%. It's still early days, but do you want to just sort of explain the rationale behind this and what the plans are?
Yeah, look, we've been working now for a couple of years in Minnesota. We've got a very good grasp on where the helium is, where it comes from, the migratory paths, etc. And so, really, this land acquisition is a nice addition to the portfolio. What we think is very prospective ground for making new helium discoveries. So really, it's all part of the growth of the company. So where we're drilling now, the focus is all about getting Topaz online. And then with this new acquisition, it's like, okay, what is the growth? Can we make additional discoveries? And then also, quite frankly, so that we really consolidate our position there if any, inevitable competition comes along too.
Yeah, I mean, on that point, you've got quite a lot of work to be done. How do you feel your balance sheet's looking to be able to do all of this work, and what's the sort of how does that all pan out in terms of capital that you have? Obviously, you've contracted a lot of the drilling, which keeps the costs a lot lower. But just talk us through your financial position for doing all this.
Yeah, certainly. Look, we just completed a financing the other week, so £3.7 million. And so that one takes us through for the next 12 months. It pays for the drill campaign as well. I mean, with this drilling, it's quite neat. So with the drilling that we've conducted to date, those are production wells, so we could plug them into a processing plant. What we're looking to do now is increase the size of the resource. So these don't need to be production wells, and so they have quite a discount in price, quite significant. So with the wells we drilled to date, $2 million each, and now we're talking about drilling up to 10 for less than the 3.7 million pounds that we've raised. So it's we get a lot of bang for our buck, some good news flow there as well. And then when we get to the next phase, really when we talk about potential production, there's a capital cost there, of course. For a helium plant, you're looking at anywhere between $10 and $50 million. And what's very pleasing is that there's a bank in Michigan. They've already put their hand up with a financing possibility for up to $12.5 million. And that would be a debt facility. So the intention then is that we end the dilutive equity financing and we switch to debt that we can then pay off with revenues from the helium.
And look, being based in the US, we know that suddenly should we say elements that are critical are catching a lot of attention from investors and the government in the US. Helium is like that. And of course, I keep stressing the US, not just actually because of this US interest, but of course, it's very useful to be producing nearby because helium does have leakage when you try and transport it, doesn't it? So
yeah,
are you capturing other, should we say, strategic-y type investors? Are you talking with them quite not aggressively, but let's do something here? How's that all going?
Well, what's quite nice is that they reach out to us, and so the word is starting to get out there. And as you say, look, the USA is the largest consumer of helium. It doesn't like to travel, so that's why it's important to have it domestically. When you start to transport, it's a bit like the leaky helium balloon. It wants to go everywhere. And so you pay for 100%, you might end up getting 70% by the time it's arrived. So therefore, being at home is important. The other thing is that it's a byproduct. So you rightly picked up on that earlier. It's more than 95% of helium production is a byproduct of natural gas. Now, for the end user, so we're talking about the computer chip manufacturers, the high-tech companies, and so on. Now, for them, they have these fairly ugly 10, 15-year take-or-pay contracts with no flexibility to get additional product. So if they want to start manufacturing more computer chips, where does the helium come from? So really why we exist is that being the primary product, helium that is, then we could perhaps bring some flexibility to the market. If they want more, fine, we can produce more. If for whatever reason they don't need product, fine. The plant isn't reliant on producing something else. So that strategic element to this project, really that is getting quite a lot of attention at the moment.
Yeah, and because I think, I mean, you haven't been a listed company for that long, and it's been fine. Your share price has been a bit flat. I mean, there's not a lot of liquidity, unfortunately, in your stock necessarily, because the shareholder base still is quite similar to when you floated, and it's a lot of the original investors, people like yourself, Neil Herbert, who's got quite a big holding, and one or two other, should we say, groups that came in. Do you expect that to start to change by bringing in other strategics? And I mean, in order for a new shareholder to come in, I mean, what is your sort of key message of actually now is the time to start looking at this? Because, actually all commodities are starting to run up now. And, we're seeing stocks move. Now, you haven't moved yet. So there's potentially the opportunity you could suddenly have a big move. What's the sort of key message there?
Well, we've seen an early mover come in with our stock, and so that's this bank out of Michigan, so University Bank. So they've taken a position of 4.99% in the company, and they're holding that. We're starting to see some others reaching out to us, and really, I think that the key message is, I mean, now is an exciting time. We've just got these well results back. That's de-risked the project quite significantly. We're about to embark on the next phase, which is increasing the volume of the project and then looking at production. So I think, like any resource story, I mean, there is whoever comes in at an earlier stage gets a lot of upside, but at the same time, they are exposed to risk, and therefore they should be rewarded with that potential upside. Whereas, once it's completely de-risked, then, it's, quite obvious that everyone will be knocking on the door. So I think probably the key message for us is that being in the US, we are actively looking to increase our US shareholder base as well. And then also, the team as well. So now our operational technical team is mostly American, and we think that it's natural progression is looking to see, okay, would be some good people to have on the board from the United States as well to increase further our presence there. So that's what we're looking at.
I mean, we're seeing that in certain mining stocks that US investors are not names that you've heard. It's not the big institutions. It's sort of sometimes you go out to Kansas or Atlanta and get these interesting little groups that just get it, and they come in and buy significant amounts of stock. It's probably only a matter, as you say, you've already got Minnesotan investors or Michigan investors. It's probably only a matter of time before these investors do come in, and presumably are you spending a bit of time marketing in the US?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in the US and be going back again as well in a couple of weeks as well. So no, there's plenty of, and as you say, it's not just the big centers that we used to, New York or Los Angeles. It's now very much some of the regional centers, and I must say Minnesota itself as well. I mean, Minnesota is quite a powerhouse. So you've got a lot of people there with an interest in the product too. You've got the Mayo Clinic, so medical applications for helium is significant. You've then got semiconductor fabrication facilities there as well, and then gas distribution companies. So it's we don't have to go very far.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I think as you say, talk about de-risking. I mean, you have de-risked this project actually significantly since your IPO, and that hasn't been reflected yet. So I mean, one would expect that at some stage that should be reflected. So opening the door again, there is quite an opportunity here to have a look at this. I mean, I think there was from memory, there was actually quite a lot of interest when you floated. I mean, it got quite a lot of publicity. A lot of people were looking at it, trading it, and it probably has quietened off a bit. So now actually is the time to probably get out and talk a bit, and for investors to start looking again, because things have moved on a lot and it's not being reflected.
Well, look, it's with the markets, there's always an expectation for consistent news flow all the time, and otherwise they start to forget about you. So earlier this year, we did have, I guess, from a market perspective, a fairly quiet few months. We just completed drilling. We were waiting to do the cleanup of the wells. There's a bit of a hiatus, and now all of a sudden, okay, that's finished, and so we were well and truly ready for the next phase. And I think that we go from one of the quieter helium companies to probably the loudest one out there. And it's going to be consistent now for the next year at least. And what I really like is that with this drill program, about every 3 weeks we're going to have yet another well completed. And if they come back at over 10% helium like the others have, then it just be phenomenal. So I think there's probably also an element of is it too good to be true? I mean, really, this is quite an outlier, and I think that people are probably stepping back a little bit just to see, okay, de-risk it further and further. But I'm very happy that everything we set out to achieve, we have achieved, and it's met expectation.
I think that's a very fair point. Actually, you have delivered on what you said you would. Just one final question for me, perhaps, is we notice that gold stocks and things run a lot, but you can see the gold price. You watch it, you follow it. Silver at the moment is running like mad. All the silver stocks running. We don't see the helium price every day. Give it a little bit of a flavour of what is happening in the helium price. And it probably isn't quite as simple as gold, where you have this nicely traded spot price the whole time. It's obviously a lot more contractual, I'm sure. But just give us a bit of a flavour of what is happening to the helium price at the moment.
Yeah, what we're seeing is that it is contractual. So when you start to see things like an average price, it's kind of meaningless, because it could be a blend of a contract which is 10 years old blended with a new contract which is 2 months old. And so it's very hard to say what is the prevailing price at this moment in time. So there are a couple of deals that are now being publicly disclosed. So that is publicly listed companies doing deals with end users directly. What we're seeing in the US is that we're seeing a bit of a premium to the prevailing price at the moment. That's because there is a depletion, or sorry, not so much helium production in the US anymore. So there is a bit more of a sense of urgency. And then what we're seeing is that in Asia, we're actually seeing a softening in the price. And that's because Russia is producing more helium and selling it into the Asian market. So yeah, it's very, polar opposites, I guess, on either side of the globe. But what we see is, and certainly the discussions are, that there's healthy appetite for helium, and look, the price is probably secondary to certainty of product. That's probably the biggest thing. Because if you think about it, if you make computer chips, helium is such a small fraction of your overall costs. Quite frankly, it probably doesn't matter what the price is. What matters is, can you get it? And that's quite a unique thing for helium.
Yeah. Look, it's actually a fascinating story, and there's obviously clearly going to be a lot of news coming out. Is there any final message you'd like to finish on, Tom?
I would just like to say that for everybody listening, that it is going to be exciting. We put out quite a few RNSs in the past few weeks, and we've got more to come as well. And so for something which is, a few years ago, it used to be, quite frankly, laughed at as all party balloons. But now I think that the tech applications, that this is in everything: data centers, AI, space launch, MRI scanners. It's a really fun way to be exposed to these fascinating industries. And we certainly are doing everything we can to deliver.
Look, thank you for coming over with a chat. If anybody watching this wants more information, please do get in touch with us at VSA, or get in touch with Tom directly. It is a fascinating story. The stock price has been not reflecting, I think, your news flow and the news flow to come. So there is a great opportunity, and I'm sure we'll be speaking again soon as more news flow comes out, Tom.
Look forward to it.
Thank you.